Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seeds of Goodness. This is the place where we share touching stories about kindness and generosity. These stories are not just small acts, they are sources of motivation that inspire us to appreciate life and believe in the goodness of the world. Join us as we spread positivity and create a better world together. If you find this story inspiring and meaningful, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on more wonderful stories. Now, let's begin with the first story. Discover the heartwarming true story of Sarah, a struggling young woman who receives an unexpected $20 from a stranger named Tom at a grocery store checkout. What seems like a simple act of kindness unfolds into a powerful tale of compassion, connection, and hope. Tom shares that the money represents his mother Rose's flowers. She's battling cancer and insisted he use it for good. Moved by his story, Sarah and her neighbor Lena visit Rose with homemade cookies, sparking a chain of kindness that changes lives. From a small Ohio town to a hospital room, watch how a $20 bill blooms into something extraordinary: legal justice, healing, and a legacy of love. Don't miss this emotional journey of generosity and resilience. Sarah's cheeks flushed, a familiar heat of shame creeping up her neck. At 29, she'd once been a preschool teacher, her days filled with crayons and laughter. But a year ago, a car accident had shattered her left leg and her life. Medical bills piled up, her job slipped away during recovery, and now she scraped by on disability checks and odd sewing jobs for neighbors. This grocery run was her first in 2 weeks, a careful list whittled down to essentials. She'd miscalculated, though, and the reality stung. I'll take some stuff back, she mumbled, reaching for the beef. Her hands trembled as she pulled it from the bag, then the peas. Just the bread and milk, please. Ellie hesitated, her young face softening. You sure? It's fine, Sarah cut in, voice tight, avoiding the cashier's pitying gaze. The line behind her shifted. 3 people now, their impatience palpable. She felt their eyes, heard the rustle of bags, and wished the floor would swallow her whole. Before Ellie could rescan, a hand reached past Sarah, a man's hand, weathered but steady, holding a crisp $20 bill. Here, he said, voice low and warm. Cover the rest. Sarah turned, startled. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered with dark hair graying at the temples, wearing a faded denim jacket and a tired smile. His brown eyes held a quiet kindness, but shadows lingered beneath them. She shook her head, stepping back. No, please, I can't. Don't put yourself out like that. He didn't retract the bill, instead pressing it gently into Ellie's hand. Let me tell you a story, he said, his tone calm but insistent. Ellie paused, the $20 hovering over the scanner, as the man, whose name tag on his jacket read Tom, leaned against the counter. My mother, Rose, is in St. Jude's Hospital up the road. Cancer's got her, stage 4. I visit her every day, bring her flowers because they make her smile. Lilies, usually, her favorite. This morning I showed up with a fresh bunch and she got mad. He chuckled, a sound laced with sorrow. Told me I'm wasting money, that I should stop buying her damn flowers and do something useful with it instead. She's stubborn like that even now. So here, this is her flowers. Accept it, please. Sarah's throat tightened, her protest dying on her lips. The weight of his words, the hospital, the cancer, the flowers, settled over her like a heavy quilt. She glanced at the $20, then at Tom, his tired smile unwavering. Thank you, she whispered, voice cracking. I'm so sorry about your mom. Tom nodded, a flicker of pain crossing his face. She's a fighter, always has been. Ellie scanned the bill, bagged the groceries, and handed Sarah the receipt. All set, she said softly, her eyes darting between them. The line behind shuffled forward, but Sarah barely noticed. She clutched her tote, the beef and peas back inside, and turned to Tom. I don't know how to repay you. You don't, he said simply. Just take care of yourself. He tipped his head, then walked toward the exit, his boots scuffing the linoleum. Sarah watched him go, the $20 story burning in her mind. Outside, the October wind whipped through Cedar Hollow's streets, rattling the bare branches of maple trees. She limped to her beat-up sedan, her cane tapping the pavement. Her legs still ached on cold days like this, and loaded the groceries into the trunk. As she drove home to her one-bedroom rental on Elm Street, the radio played a soft ballad, but her thoughts stayed on Tom and Rose. She didn't know them, but their story clung to her like damp leaves. At home, she unpacked the bags, setting the beef in the fridge and the bread on the counter. Her kitchen was small, the paint peeling near the sink, but it was hers. She sank into a chair, her leg throbbing, and pulled out her phone. A text from her neighbor, Mrs. Lena Carter, a spry 70-year-old widow who'd taken Sarah under her wing, popped up. "Need anything from the store, hun? I'm heading out." Sarah hesitated, then typed back, "No, I'm good. Someone helped me today." She paused, then added, "Tell you about it later." The evening stretched on, the sky darkening beyond her window. Sarah cooked a simple meal, beef and peas over rice, and ate alone, the silence broken only by the hum of the fridge. She thought of Rose, stubborn in her hospital bed, and Tom, carrying her flowers in a $20 bill. She didn't expect to see him again, but Cedar Hollow was small. Maybe their paths would cross. For now, she savored the meal, a small gift born from a stranger's kindness and a mother's love. The late October dusk settled over Cedar Hollow, Ohio, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gray as Sarah Mitchell sat at her small kitchen table, the remnants of her beef and peas dinner cooling in a chipped bowl. The $20 from Tom, the stranger at Harper's Market, still weighed on her mind, its story of his mother, Rose, and her hospital lilies threading through her thoughts like a quiet melody. It was October 26, 2024, and the air outside her Elm Street rental carried the crisp bite of autumn, rattling the loose window pane above the sink. Sarah's leg ached from the day's exertion, a dull throb radiating from the pins in her shin, a constant reminder of the accident that had upended her life. But tonight, the pain felt distant, overshadowed by the unexpected warmth of Tom's gesture. She leaned back in her chair, her cane propped against the table, and glanced at the grocery bags still unpacked on the counter. The bread, milk, and a small luxury she'd added with the leftover change. A bar of dark chocolate. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory, a tiny rebellion against the months of scraping by. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her reverie. It was Mrs. Lena Carter, her neighbor, replying to her earlier text. "Helped you, huh? Spill the beans tomorrow. I'm baking cookies. Come over." Sarah smiled faintly, typing a quick, "See you then," before setting the phone down. The silence of the apartment pressed in, broken only by the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. She stood, wincing as her leg protested, and limped to the counter to unwrap the chocolate. As she broke off a square, savoring its bittersweet melt, she thought of Rose, stubborn, sick, and still fierce enough to scold her son from a hospital bed. Sarah didn't know her, but she felt a strange kinship, a thread of resilience tying them across the miles to St. Jude's Hospital. The next morning, Sarah woke to a gray sky and the faint smell of sugar drifting from Mrs. Lena's house next door. She dressed slowly, jeans, a faded sweater, her cane gripped tightly, and made her way over, the October wind tugging at her scarf. Lena's home was a cozy bungalow, its porch sagging but adorned with pumpkins and a weathered welcome sign. The door swung open before Sarah could knock, revealing Lena in a flour-dusted apron, her silver hair pulled into a loose bun. "Come in, hun," Lena said, her voice bright but edged with the gravel of age. "Cookies are hot. Oatmeal raisin, your favorite?" Sarah stepped inside, the warmth of the kitchen enveloping her like a hug. The counter was littered with cooling racks, golden cookies piled high, and a kettle whistled softly on the stove. She settled into a chair, her cane resting against the wall, as Lena slid a plate in front of her and poured 2 mugs of tea. "So," Lena said, sitting across from her with a knowing grin, "who's this mystery helper? Don't keep an old lady waiting." Sarah took a bite of cookie, its sweetness grounding her, and recounted the scene at Harper's Market, the $12 shortfall, her fumbling with the groceries, Tom's quiet intervention, and his story about Rose. Lena listened, her sharp green eyes softening with each word, her hands cradling her mug.
"Flowers for his mama," Lena murmured when Sarah finished. "That's a good son. And you, taking it, that's grace, Sarah. Not everyone can accept help."
Sarah shrugged, staring into her tea.
"Felt wrong at first, but he wouldn't let me say no. Said it was what his mom wanted."
Lena nodded, a thoughtful hum escaping her.
"Reminds me of my Henry, my late husband. He'd give the shirt off his back to anyone who needed it. Once paid for a stranger's gas when we were broke ourselves. Said it was paying the world back for keeping us alive."
Sarah smiled faintly. "Sounds like a good man."
"He was," Lena said, her voice softening. "Gone 10 years now, but I still feel him in little things, like these cookies. He loved 'em." She paused, then leaned forward. "You know, I've got extra from this batch. Why don't we take some to that hospital? St. Jude's isn't far. Maybe find this Rose and brighten her day."
Sarah blinked, surprised. "You'd do that?" "Why not?" Lena said, standing with a spry energy that belied her 70 years. "You've got a story tying you to her. Let's make it more than $20. The idea sparked something in Sarah, a flicker of purpose she hadn't felt since the accident stole her classroom.
"Okay,"
she said, nodding. "Let's do it." An hour later, they were in Lena's old pickup, a tin of cookies nestled in Sarah's lap, the heater rattling as they drove the 20 miles to St. Jude's. The hospital loomed against the gray sky, its brick facade stern but softened by planters of wilted mums. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee, and nurses bustled past with clipped efficiency. At the reception desk, a young woman named Mia, her badge pinned crookedly, looked up from her computer.
"We're here to see Rose."
Sarah hesitated, realizing she didn't know the last name.
"Her son's Tom. She's got cancer, loves lilies."
Mia frowned, typing quickly.
"Rose Grayson, room 312, oncology. Visiting hours end at 6 p.m. You've got an hour. Sign in here."
Sarah scribbled her name, Lena following suit, and they took the elevator up, the tin clinking softly in Sarah's grip. The third floor was quiet, the hum of machines seeping through closed doors. Room 312's door was ajar, and Sarah peeked inside, her breath catching. Rose Grayson lay propped on pillows, her silver hair thin and wispy, her face gaunt but fierce. An IV dripped into her arm, and a vase of wilting lilies sat on the bedside table, the remnants of Tom's morning visit. She looked up as Sarah knocked lightly, her blue eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" Rose rasped, voice sharp despite her frailty.
"I'm Sarah," she said, stepping in with Lena behind her. "Your son, Tom, helped me yesterday, gave me $20 at the market. Said it was your flowers. We brought you something."
Rose's gaze flicked to the tin, then back to Sarah, softening slightly. "That fool boy," she muttered, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. "Told him to stop wasting money on me."
"He listened," Sarah said, setting the cookies on the table. "These are from us, oatmeal raisin. Thought you might like them."
Rose stared at the tin, then at Sarah and Lena, her eyes glistening.
"You didn't have to," she said, voice trembling. "But thank you."
Lena smiled, patting Sarah's arm.
"Kindness spreads, Rose. Your boy started it."
They sat with her, the room filling with quiet talk. Rose's love of lilies, Lena's husband, Sarah's sewing. For an hour, the hospital felt less cold, the cookies a small bridge between strangers tied by a $20 bill. The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Hospital cast a sterile glow over room 312 as Sarah Mitchell and Mrs. Lena Carter sat with Rose Grayson on the afternoon of October 26, 2024. The oatmeal raisin cookies sat open on the bedside table, their sweet scent mingling with the faint antiseptic air, a quiet defiance against the room's clinical chill. Rose, frail but sharp-eyed, nibbled on one, her IV-tethered hand trembling slightly as she set it down. Her silver hair framed a face carved by illness and resilience, and the wilting lilies Tom had brought that morning drooped in their vase, a fading echo of his devotion. For an hour, The three women talked. Rose about her garden back home, Lena about her late husband's quirks, Sarah about the preschool kids she'd once taught. The clock ticked towards 6 p.m., visiting hour's end, but the warmth in the room stretched time thin. "You're good folks," Rose said finally, her voice raspy but firm. "Didn't expect strangers to show up with cookies over my boy's nonsense." She glanced at Sarah, a flicker of amusement in her blue eyes. "That $20? He's always been soft like that. Got it from his dad, God rest him." Sarah smiled, her cane resting against the chair. "It wasn't nonsense to me. That $20 fed me when I couldn't. I'm just glad we could bring you something back." Rose nodded, her gaze drifting to the lilies. "He'll be here tomorrow, probably with more flowers despite me yelling. Stubborn mule." She paused, then added softly, "Tell him I like the cookies. Might shut him up for once." Lena chuckled, patting Rose's hand. "We'll pass it along if we see him. You rest now. Those lilies aren't the only thing blooming today." They left as a nurse, Mia, from reception, poked her head in, signaling time was up. Sarah clutched the empty tin, her leg aching from the long sit, and leaned on Lena as they shuffled to the elevator. Outside, the October night had deepened, stars piercing the cold sky above Cedar Hollow. The drive back was quiet, the pickup's heater rumbling, until Lena broke the silence. "She's a fighter, that Rose," she said. "Reminds me of you, Sarah. Bent but not broken." Sarah stared out the window, the hospital shrinking in the rear view. "I don't feel like a fighter most days. Just tired." "You keep going," Lena replied, her voice steady. "That's fighting. And today you gave an old lady a smile. Counts for something." Back on Elm Street, Sarah limped into her apartment, the tin clattering onto the counter. She sank onto the couch, exhaustion tugging at her, but a faint glow lingered, a sense of purpose sparked by Rose's gratitude, Lena's cookies, Tom's $20. Sleep came easier that night, dreams of lilies and laughter weaving through the dark. 2 days later, on October 28th, Sarah returned to Harper's Market for a few staples: eggs, butter, a bag of flour to bake something for Lena in return. The store buzzed with its usual rhythm, Ellie at Register 3 scanning a line of early holiday shoppers. Sarah's tote was lighter this time, her budget stretched but manageable thanks to a recent sewing job. As she reached the checkout, a familiar figure caught her eye. Tom, standing by the flower display near the entrance, a bunch of fresh lilies in his hands. She hesitated, then approached, her cane tapping the floor. "Tom?" He turned, recognition lighting his tired face. "Sarah, right? From the other day?" "Yeah," she said, smiling. "How's your mom?" "Still kicking," he said with a wry grin. "Went off about these flowers this morning, same old song, stop wasting money, Thomas." He mimicked her tone, then softened. "Thanks again for taking the $20. Meant a lot to her, even if she won't say it." Sarah shifted her weight, easing her leg. "Actually, I saw her. Yesterday. Took her some cookies with my neighbor, Lena. She liked them, said to tell you." Tom blinked, surprise washing over him. You went to see her?" "Felt right," Sarah said. "That $20, it wasn't just money. It was a story. We wanted to keep it going." He stared at the lilies, then at Sarah, his eyes glistening. "I don't know what to say. She's been so down. Cancer's eating her fast. You and your neighbor, that's more than I could have asked." "No thanks needed," Sarah said, echoing his words from their first meeting. "Just take care of her." Tom nodded, swallowing hard. "I will. You're good people, Sarah." They parted, Tom to the hospital, Sarah to the checkout, but the encounter lingered. Over the next week, she baked a batch of cookies for Lena, who insisted on splitting them with the widow across the street, Mrs. Evans. The chain of kindness rippled outward, small acts stitching Cedar Hollow tighter. On November 5th, Sarah's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She answered, wary. "Hello? Sarah Mitchell?" A woman's voice, crisp, professional. "This is Clara Hensley, attorney with Grayson & Associates. We're contacting you about Pinnacle Daycare, your old employer." Sarah's heart sank. "Pinnacle? They owe me wages, but—" "We know," Clara cut in. "Tom Grayson referred us. His mother, Rose, mentioned you to him, said you're a fighter who got cheated. We're a law firm in Columbus, and Tom's one of our partners. He asked us to look into your case, pro bono. We've got evidence Pinnacle's been stiffing employees for years. Willing to fight? Sarah's breath caught, her mind racing to Tom. Quiet Tom with his $20 and lilies. Yes, she said, voice trembling. Yes, I'll fight. Weeks later, on November 20th, Sarah stood outside Cedar Hollow's post office, a settlement check in hand, $15,000 from Pinnacle, forced to pay her wages and penalties after Clara's team dismantled their excuses. It wasn't a fortune, but it cleared her medical debt, fixed her car, and left enough to breathe. She mailed a thank you note to Tom, enclosing a lily sketch she'd drawn. Her sewing hands weren't great with pencils, but it felt right. That evening, she sat with Lena on her porch, sharing tea and cookies. Heard from Tom, Sarah said. Rose passed yesterday. Peaceful, he said. Those lilies kept her going. Lena squeezed her hand. You kept her going, hun, and him. Sarah nodded, tears prickling. She'd never meet Rose again, but the $20, the cookies, the fight, it had all bloomed from a moment at Harper's Market. The next day she bought lilies for Mrs. Evans, leaving them with a note. From Rose. In Cedar Hollow, the flowers lived on, carried by hands that refused to let kindness fade.